because she considered it to be an underserved area, which is what she's addressing through her work at the Mint Packaging along with the team, creating sustainable and cost-effective packaging solutions from their clients for their clients across various industries. So once again, thank you very much for joining in, Rishika, and we're looking forward to learning a lot from you and your experience.
Awesome. Thank you for such a nice introduction, Ahan. And yeah, like I said, I'm so coming across you guys was a really opportune, like fun thing that sort of happened a couple of weeks ago. And I think what was most exciting about it is the fact that I haven't come across a cohort of people that are interested in sustainability to the degree that with what I see with you guys. So it was very nice to come and sort of be a part of this and also share my thoughts and my experiences. So I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Great. I think we'll get right into it. Thank you so much. I think those are very kind words, and we hope to live up to the kind of expectations you set for SAS Mafia. So I think we'll start with your journey and your journey with Mint. So we'd like to know more about how the Mint packaging came into being, more about your products and how they're superior to the normal alternatives in the market.
Great, awesome. So, like you had mentioned, we did start around 3 years ago, bang in the middle of the pandemic. I have two other co-founders, and we are a completely remote team. So my partners work out of Bombay and New York, and the rest of my team is also just all pan-India. We actually just had a retreat a couple of days ago where we all got to meet in person. That was really nice. I'm sure everybody that does remote working knows what that's like. The reason that the company was founded was because during the pandemic, especially, there was this whole culture of excessively ordering things into the house. So there was boxes piling up everywhere, so much waste that sort of didn't have a second life, or there was no sort of system that people understood in terms of what to do with it. So everybody would just throw their waste. Weirdly, and I guess very serendipitously, my family is also in packaging. My family operates a very old printing press, and I would always hear them talk about how virgin grade paper is the best. We should be using something like that, and that's the caliber of packaging. And the most cutting edge stuff is how do you make the paper better. And it was always a little funny because I would while you have that package with you, and while it's extremely important to protect the product, to transfer information, the next thing you're just throwing it away. Nobody really thinks about packaging beyond that, beyond the unboxing experience, and beyond sort of understanding what it is that the product does. And this sort of led us to think about packaging made from waste materials. If there any way is going to be going back to waste, why can't we also think about it as a feedstock that comes from waste? And that sort of kicked off the Mint on its journey. Now we also work with a lot of other products such as bioplastics, mycelium, which is mushroom packaging. We're working with a company for their seaweed packaging. But what really kicked it off was this entire concept of if it's going into waste, it should be coming from waste. And a very fun fact, rather not so fun fact, is the fact that India is a net importer of waste. So we become a dump yard, and we get our waste from the so-called developed countries. So we've become a dumping ground for Europe. We've become a dumping ground for the US, Australia. And this used to be the role that China used to play. But now we've sort of, taken the limelight in terms of that. So it's not even, and that's only because our own waste management processes are so broken in India that even if somebody is, say, for example, recycling, very little bit of it actually goes to where it needs to be going, and it's not useful waste essentially. So that was something also that we wanted to wanted to work in that space, to sort of work with paper mills and understand what how we could make this process simpler for customers such as yourself, to look at a box and know exactly where it needs to be going. So that's sort of long and short of how we've come about to be. Our main industries, or our main clients that we work with come from the D2C space, the apparel and fashion space, the beauty cosmetics, FMCG space. And one of the other things that we try and do is that as a company, we let our clients focus on their products and leave the packaging bit to us. Packaging is complex. It's usually an afterthought. What we try to do is bring it in as something right from the very beginning, So you're able to optimize the size of your packaging. That way, you're also using less materials. It's more lightweight. You're saving more in terms of shipment, and also thinking about designing for recyclability, for biodegradability, for compostability, rather than just using it as a plug and play afterthought that just gets your good from point A to point B. And it's not a very, I mean, nobody really thinks about packaging so much. It's not a very glamorous thing in the very beginning. It's something that they realize after, as they're like listing on Amazon, they realize that they need a box to be able to send it across. But we're sort of trying to change that perception via our work in structural design and graphic design as well. So if a client ever comes to us and says, we want to develop something that's fresh, new, hasn't been done before, we're able to do that for them. So that's the gist of what we're doing so far.
Great. I think you're tackling a lot of problems and also making it pretty attractive as a product, I would say, and you're trying to solve for that aspect as well, which is, I think, very commendable. And you mentioned a lot of disruptive, or I would say, new kind of technologies and solutions that are, being considered for packaging, like mycelium and seaweed. So along those lines, I think we'd like to know, like, what are the next big thing you and the men are going after? Like, you started out, you found your niche, and where does it go from here?
So when we first started out, we were the first players in the sustainable packaging space in India. And the reason that we're able to work with all these various kinds of materials is because we have material designers on board, of course. But in addition to that, we also work with a pan-India vendor network in terms of using their facilities to produce all of our packaging. So while we have a certain vendor vetting process that we sort of, adopt, we are able to work with multiple vendors in various parts of India so that we're able to also deliver to our client closest to them. Now, what this allows us to do is one thing, obviously, you're cutting on your transport footprint. The second thing is that you're able to work with multiple different kinds of materials and multiple different types of processes. So that's something a little bit different, in terms of what our competitors are doing, I would say. It also allows us to then sort of work with these kind of materials that other people might not be working with. And, these teams come out of, say IIT Chennai, for example, or IIT Kharagpur, and they're all really small teams, but we sort of help them figure out a use case for their product via our client network, and then develop on it and help them sort of, push it forward in terms of how it could be a good packaging solution. So going from just us being able to do paper-based packaging to being able to do all of this was, a journey of 3 years. But moving forward, we really want to be thought leaders in the sustainability space. So it's not just about packaging materials, but it's about thinking about sustainability holistically from an organizational standpoint. So one of the things that we did roll out was what I was talking about with regards to waste management, right? If you are a net emitter of some sort of packaging material or some sort of plastic waste, there needs to be some initiatives that you're taking as a company in order to either offset an equivalent amount of the same kind of packaging, reduction, and abatement. So this is something that we are sort of focusing on, not just in terms of packaging, but in terms of waste as a whole, and trying to also change how people perceive what is useful and not useful waste. So, even in our own homes, I don't think a lot of us separate our wet and dry waste. But if the wet and dry waste gets mixed up, the dry waste becomes unusable. It cannot be taken into its second life as, being pulped down into new paper sheets or whatever that might look like. So we are sort of, working with organizations, first of all, to raise that kind of awareness and education. And secondly, how do they then think about working with their materials in a more circular manner? If it's waste for them, can it be feedstock for another industry? We have the reach and the know-how to be able to sort of build those connections, saying, for example, if you are in the pharma industry, this is a very broad example. If you're in the pharma industry and your medicines are expiring over a certain period of time, while they are expiring and you have to dispose of it, it still retains all of its nutritional value. It could be used as a base or a powder for, say, the cattle industry, which doesn't, I mean, the expiry date or whatever doesn't really matter for that. So these are kind of the ways that we're trying to build these sort of links and connections and saying, let's think about waste as in a very different manner from what we're currently doing. It's a very challenging problem also, because it's something that, companies all over the world are trying to do. It's just that moving or shifting your existing systems from where we are currently linearly into something that's a little bit more circular is a bit of a challenge. And that's sort of something that we're trying to bring about. We're also trying to work with companies to understand what their pain points might be in terms of sustainability, right? That is sort of like a basket of pick and choose ESG solutions, I would say. So if somebody's looking at what is the impact of my supply chain, how do I go about ethical procurement in a better manner? How do I think about optimizing our clients are having with regards to their sustainability? We're trying to find some sort of a solution that might work with regards to optimizing for them, saving on costs, as well as creating a greener planet, because that is the need of the hour. I mean, everybody's sort of waking up to it. Sustainability has become something that companies are thinking about on various levels. We're no longer at the part of capacity building where it's a top down thing. It's the CEOs of companies are not the ones that are making these decisions saying we need to become more sustainable. It's honestly coming from the ground up, where everybody is so aware of the sort of impact that we're making, that they're all trying to reduce their impact as much as possible, with the focus mainly being on companies making those changes.
So that's a lot of work and a lot of boxes you're going to take in the future as well. I think very
And I think
comprehensive.
it's critical when you build a community like this for those sort of ideas to cross-reference, within this. Like I said, we work with a lot of these incubation or accelerators out of various institutions. And what that helps us do is sort of access this cohort of people that are, working on these kind of solutions, and then take them to market. So these sort of forums, these sort of communities are extremely important and pivotal in being able to do that.
Got it. So sounds to me like you guys are looking to build systems that are resilient, that are circular in nature, to facilitate this kind of transition to sustainable packaging materials. So could you elaborate more on these circular systems and how you're trying to build them? And we'd love to know some success stories and case studies, as well as challenges you faced in building these systems, which are so intricate and complicated and can very often be difficult to adopt as well.
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest things that we do, I mean, we're still working with this in the packaging space. We haven't yet scaled it up to something that, that everybody can sort of work with. But one of the biggest challenges was working with existing paper and packaging waste from one of our clients' facilities and converting that into packaging that was usable for them. So then, we sort of ensure that there's some sort of a waste management system in place, so that there's enough segregation at source, and then getting our waste management partners to pick it up, to take it to the right places for further processing, getting them made into new sheets of paper, and then using those particular sheets as packaging has been something that we're very proud of, because it's then almost like saying, this is the waste I'm emitting. I'm now taking this waste and making it into something useful for the second time. Another thing that I don't know how much of an innovation this is really, but the fact that we think about sustainable packaging as being as coming at a higher cost than the other the maybe more traditional sort of packaging. We've worked pretty hard with our vendor networks and with our material sourcing to ensure that it is cost competitive with regards to already the traditional packaging solutions that are available out there. So like I said, the challenges with circularity is, one thing is that, of course, cost is a huge issue. The second thing is, how do we make it as mainstream as possible, right? Like, how do we sort of, it's not easy to take a waste or a byproduct of a certain industrial process or a product, and then have it be used as a feedstock for something else. What we can do and what's important to note, is figuring out the right catchments that we can target in order to be able to do this. And what I mean by this is, an industrial area, for example, has somebody that's emitting like 50 metric tons of carbon dioxide on a daily basis, for example, right? Figuring out how somebody else can maybe work with them to say, hey, my facilities are a lot greener. this is the various things that I'm doing about it. Maybe we can cross collaborate and adopt some of it, and the benefits of it can be split amongst the two rather than just one person, sort of working on it. So those are the kind of connections that we're trying to make right now. We're still very early on in the game, but it's something that we are sort of almost crowdsourcing. We're talking to multiple people on what they think the right solutions might look like for somebody that's looking to make inroads in the space. And then, sort of push that across with multiple different use cases. Another challenge is, as we know, unless we're able to prove cost savings on multiple fronts, companies are not going to make these changes. So that's another thing that we're actively working on right now, building that use case for it, saying that, if you might have to have a slightly higher upfront cost right now, but over the next couple of years, you will see the return on that kind of investment. I think the most relevant example, something like that, would be to buy an electric vehicle. The upfront cost is so high, but over the span of time, you're able to chart your savings in terms of like carbon abatement, in terms of fuel usage, etc. So yeah, that's where we're at in our journey. Like I said, we're not doing it at full scale yet, but that's where we're headed. That's the direction that we're headed.
Super. Like you said, adoption is particularly a problem, especially if you're not able to sell that benefit in the long term to potential clients. Any interesting stories or anecdotes wherein there was someone who was very resistant to this change, although they were looking for sustainable options, and you finally managed to get them to make this transition?
So actually, I'll flip the question a little bit. Everybody that approaches us is obviously very keen on, taking that first step towards a more sustainable future. But the sort of use cases that we get are super duper interesting. We work with one of the beauty giants in India who wanted to have completely plastic-free packaging. And the product that they wanted was this little eyeshadow box. And that kind of packaging is typically made with plastic inserts. It has a whole like plastic outer covering. All of that hasn't been done before in the country. But working with our materials team, our structural design team, and building a product that was completely plastic free, while also understanding that there might have been a small, obviously there will be, you can't compare paper and plastic. Plastic is always going to be cheaper. So the client taking that step because it was a part of their mission to become a more sustainable company, and adding that additional extra cost right now, that made a huge difference. That made a huge difference to their entire operations, their entire marketing story, their entire branding. But also keeping in mind that there might have been a little bit of an additional cost. The second example I'd like to bring up is we were approached by a huge retail giant in South India who kept getting hit with plastic bans, like plastic fines because of the plastic ban. To a point where they had racked up, I would say maybe 5 lakhs every couple of months just because of the bans. And they were like, instead of us paying these fines, we'd rather just change the base material itself, like tackle the problem the right way and change, then move from our existing packaging towards more sustainable packaging. So while it might have been a higher upfront cost, in that very moment, over a period of time, over a period of 2 years, they've been able to completely negate their impact on, first of all, on the plastic ban, and secondly, in terms of the fines. So those are the two ends of the spectrum that we see in terms of, the various kind of challenges that companies are facing.
Very interesting, and I think it also alludes to point where even policy has a big role to play. It's not always just incentives. You also need to put the right pressure systems in place to ensure these kind of transitions. And
absolutely, and policy is a double-edged sword, right? We see so many people now, a lot of the larger clients especially, have extended producer's responsibility is now a big waste management practice in the plastics field, which basically means the amount of plastic that you put out, you need to be recycling an equivalent amount. While that's in principle, it's a fantastic idea. It needs to be done. That's the only way that we'll be able to, push the needle in terms of the sort of plastic usage that we are doing. The process itself is very obscure. It's very difficult for companies to sort of go from where they are to what they need to be in terms of reporting standards, in terms of compliances. So again, that's one of the things that we're sort of, thinking about in terms of how do we help our customers go from this point to that point, and not just be compliant, but also do it with the right intention of being able to make some sort of the right impact. There are now entire teams within organizations that are working dedicatedly towards EPR. And that's, it's redundant, it's not required. So how do we simplify that process? How do we dumb it down so that it's super easy and adoptable, for multiple companies to take up?
Sure. Very interesting, and happy to know that you're doing so much in the right direction. And you mentioned a bunch of times that you're looking to scale, you're trying to crowdsource information, and touch points where you can provide solutions. And along those lines, we'd love to know how we as a community and an audience can interact with the Demand Packaging, interact with you better to accelerate your growth, how we can collaborate to make this more mainstream and bring these sustainable solutions to the fore so that we, like you said, tip the needle the right direction.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it is because of communities and forums like this that there is innovation happening. There is a lot of development happening in the space. If anybody has any ideas in terms of if there's something that they wanted, a certain material, for example, that they want to use, saying we'd love to see this go from an idea or a concept into a scalable solution. We'd love to work with somebody like that on the material side of things. We're always on the lookout for, motivated individuals that are building these circular systems, that are doing something that, a lot of, this is not taught in college. It's not something that, is readily available information to everyone then and there. But people that are maybe, taking these circularity courses, understanding the complexity of the system, especially in a country like India, we're poised to build a system. It's just that we're not there yet. So sort of in the here and now, being able to lay the framework in order to be able to do that. I would love to, hear from anyone in the audience if they have any ideas, if they've seen any other companies that are doing something like this, if they would like to collaborate with us. That is the kind of, collaboration that I would be looking at. And of course, if anybody ever needs packaging, we're here for that as well.
Great. I think a lot of touch points we figured out, and we're sure that Sauce Mafia and the Mend have a lot of ways they can collaborate and take things forward, and we look forward to taking that up. I think we've got a lot of questions, particularly for you, and very packaging specific questions. So
Yeah.
if you're ready, we can move on to the Q&A.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So I'll start with Swami's question. Wants to hear an example where your firm shipped a heavyweight, oddly shaped, fragile item across the world with waterproof packaging in a sustainable way. Usually these kind of items are covered in polyurethane foam in a large cardboard box covered in polyethylene sheet. So a very specific, complicated, and I would say a longer term in terms of, since it's international, very unique case.
Yeah. So we have a company in Dubai that works in the frozen foods packaging. Frozen foods sector. And what we did, and of course for them the requirement was to ensure that the food inside, so it's like whatever bags of peas and meats and etc., remain cold. And typically the solution that's used in that situation is thermocol. So you put your product in a box of thermocol. You put it in a cardboard box, like Swami said. You then wrap it with some plastic sheets, some plastic tape, and then ship it out. What we did was, the perfect replacement of thermocol, according to us, is mycelium. So we created a mycelium box for them, and then use this mycelium box, or a mycelium layer, so it goes inside a corrugated box. And then outside of that, we have a product called bioplastic cling wrap. So bioplastic cling wrap is essentially cling wrap, but it's made from cornstarch. So this is a completely compostable solution. There's another company that's doing, and that we're working with closely, is doing completely water-soluble cling wrap. So while after you finish wrapping it, or after you're done throwing it, you can literally throw it overboard your shipping container, and it should dissolve in the water, in your ocean water, without leaving any traces behind.